There's a moment where most high earners with a financial advisor run into. You're about to make a real decision, pension versus ISA, what to do with the bonus, whether you can afford to step back in a few years. Maybe your advisor even models it for you. And somehow, you still don't know what to do. You're paying for professional advice, often a percentage of your portfolio every year. But the pressure of making those decisions and getting them right doesn't actually reduce. So what are you really paying for? In this video, I'm going to break that down. Which parts are worth paying for, which parts aren't, and which decisions are always yours to make. When someone says, I have a financial advisor, what does it actually mean? Sometimes it means a one-off specialist for a specific job. Sometimes it means ongoing relationship where someone manages your portfolio and charges continuously for that. Those are not the same thing. But that's not obvious from the outside, as they're often presented under the same label. And when it comes to a large sum of money, hiring someone for help is a completely reasonable response. Investing feels consequential, the money gets bigger, the stakes gets higher, and paying for a regulated professional can feel like the sensible structured thing to do. That's not a mistake, but at some point, something starts to crack. Sometimes it's a number. You did the math properly for the first time. 1% on a 250,000 portfolio, that's £2,500 a year, quietly living and no longer compounding for you. And that might still feel worth it if the returns justified it. But then you look at that too, and you realize most active managers underperform their benchmark over the long term. And even when they overperform, the fees often erase the advantage. So both questions arrive at once. What is this actually costing me, and what I'm actually getting for it? And that's when a deeper question surfaces. You did your due diligence when you hired someone. You checked that they were regulated, qualified, FCA registered, and that matters. But after all that, you still can't answer the question that actually keeps you up. Is this person genuinely working in my interest, or just managing the part that's easiest to package and sell? That's not something qualifications tell you. If the fees are high, the active management mostly underperforms, and you still can't tell whose interests are actually being served, are they just not worth it? The honest answer is this: it depends entirely on what you're asking them to do. Because not all financial decisions are the same. Some are genuinely better outsourced, some aren't. And that distinction is what the rest of this video is about. So let's start with where financial advisors do earn their fees. Some decisions carry real technical complexity, real regulatory weight, and real consequences if handled badly. For example, a defined benefit pension transfer, a complex inheritance, cross-border tax situations. When we relocated abroad, we had calls with one of the big accountancy firms. There was simply no way to figure out the double tax treaty, the pension rules, and the income tax implications in a new country or our own, especially while managing the entire relocation with a newborn and a dog. That's not a knowledge gap you close by reading more articles. The rules are complex, the stakes are real, and getting it wrong has lasting consequences. That's exactly where a specialist earns their fee. There's a behavioral case too. Some people might need a professional relationship to stay the course, to avoid selling when market fall, or sitting in cash waiting for certainty that never arrives. If that's what the relationship is doing, that has a real compounding value. But here's the problem. You can't prove it. You can't calculate the fees. You can't calculate the cost of mistakes you didn't make. What would have happened if you'd sold in March 2020 without someone talking you out of it? You never know. And this isn't just true for people who already have an advisor. A lot of you have probably considered hiring one at some point. You've done the research, you understand ETF and how passive investing work. You consider doing it yourself. But there's still a thought that lingers. What if there's a blind spot I won't find until it's already cost me? You don't know what you've avoided. You don't know what's still missing. You can't measure what you can't see, which is exactly why is a financial advisor worth it never gets a clean answer. But let's take that behavioral argument seriously for a moment. If the main value is to stay the course, not selling when market fall, not sitting in cash, is there a cheaper way to get the same outcome? Let's take pension as an example, because that's what I see most high earners around me outsource. A pension often becomes the largest single asset someone has. It can grow for decades, and the fees on it, that compounds too. 1 or 2% of your total pot every year quietly. And the market has changed. Low-cost platforms, passive index funds, robo-advisors. You can't access most of the things easily 15 years ago. Now they're straightforward, low-cost, and available to everyone. So for a long-term, low-touch portfolio, yes, there are cheaper ways to stay the course and avoid the mistakes. And for most high earners, time poor, analytically capable, with a long runway ahead, keeping it simple, passive, and automated isn't settling for less. The evidence says it's actually the stronger approach. But pension drawdown is a completely different conversation. When you're approaching retirement, you might need a more precise cash flow plan, sequencing withdrawals, managing tax, state pension timing, how the portfolio shifts as you get closer, more variables, more technical, harder to reverse. That's something I'd be happy to pay for. Same asset, different stage, completely different answer, depending entirely on which decision you're talking about. So the question isn't, are advisors worth it? It's which decisions are better outsourced and which are better retained. And one more thing worth saying, if paying 1% was what got you invested in the first place instead of sitting in cash for another 3 years, that was probably still the right call. Because the real cost isn't slightly high fees, it's leaving your money in cash for years, missing the growth and the compounding. Most people worry about paying higher fees, fewer think about the cost of not being invested at all. So if that's where you started, that's a reasonable place to have started. Just don't overlook the exit terms when you're doing your due diligence. Some arrangements make it harder than you should to leave or reassess later. Knowing that upfront keeps the options open. So which parts are actually worth paying for? This is a framework I built for myself from working inside wealth management, researching how these decisions get made, and figuring out my own setup over the years. I categorize financial help into 3 distinct types, and I segment them by 3 questions. How much effort does it take to do well? How costly is it to get it wrong? And how often does it actually show up? Once you map those, the outsourcing decision becomes a lot clearer. The first is execution. Picking a platform, choosing the funds, setting the allocation, rebalancing when needed, actually committing and doing it. And as we've already covered, the evidence points clearly towards keeping it simple, passive, and largely left alone. Set up properly once, automated where possible, revisited occasionally. So what's actually worth spending money or time on here? 2 things are genuinely valuable upfront. Getting the setup right once and understanding the behavioral traps before they show up. If you still compress the bottom after that, that's not a knowledge problem, it's a clarity problem. What helps there is someone who helps you think it through properly, what you're aiming for, what risks you're taking, and what you might be missing, until the decision becomes clear enough to act on. Then you run it yourself. That's something I cover in more detail separately, and a whole series of investment and portfolio-related videos to make the execution layer easier for you. I'll link that below. The second is structure. Think of it as the floor plan of your financial life, not what you invest in, but how it's organized around the life you're building. Is the pension the right size for your timeline? Is it enough staying accessible? Do you have too much sitting in cash, not working hard enough, or too much locked in property with commitments you can't easily shift? These are the decisions that arguably matter more than the funds you actually picked. They determine whether the foundations are solid, whether your structure holds when life doesn't go to plan, and whether the whole thing is heading in the right direction towards the life you actually want to build. And this is the part that can't simply be handed over, because the inputs are yours, your timeline, your value, your tax position, what trade-offs you're willing to make, what you're building towards. Nobody else can design that well without you, and they shouldn't be making any of these calls without you. The effort is high, the consequences are high, and unlike execution, those decisions don't get settled once and disappear. Your situation changes, new decisions keep arriving. So what most people need at this stage isn't someone to take over, it's someone who can help them think it through, map the decisions, name the trade-offs, pressure test the logic, and move from uncertainty to clarity. That kind of help exists, but it rarely comes in the right form. It tends to arrive bundled with services you don't need, or priced as though you need a complete financial plan. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. There are obviously commercial reasons why the market is structured this way, but it leaves over 12 million people in the UK sitting in what they call the advice gap, without the kind of help that actually matches what they need. That's why I wrote The Compound, and that's what my work has been built around ever since. Helping people think through the structural decisions properly without taking them over. I've already made videos on the core structural decisions, pension versus ISA, what to do with a lump sum, and the 100K threshold, all linked below. The third is specialist input. mortgage and remortgage advice, defined benefit pension transfers, inheritance tax, cross-border situations, retirement drawdown planning. Take mortgages as the clearest example. A good mortgage advisor brings access and process knowledge and structural judgment you usually don't have yourself. They know the lenders, they shape the application, and they keep the whole thing moving. The effort to replicate that yourself is high. The cost of getting it wrong is significant. And it's not something you do continuously. It arrives at a specific moment. That's a pattern across all specialist input. Very high effort, very high consequence, and occasional. So when something ticks all three of these boxes, it probably makes sense to bring a specialist at the point of need for that specific job. One-off, paid for the complexity, not on the monthly retainer. 3 types, 3 different delegation rules. Execution, keep it simple, automate it, get the setup right once. Structure, the thinking can be handed over, and this is the layer the market has never served well. Specialist input, bring in the right person when the moment calls for it. That might sound simple, but this is a paradox in practice. Most people are paying for the part that could easily be automated, and it's not cheap, while doing the hardest part entirely on their own. And it's not hard to see how that happens. The model that the industry offers is the portfolio management. There are historical and commercial reasons for that, probably a topic for another day. In the current form, they offer continuous service, percentage-based fees, minimum portfolio thresholds. And the structure layer, the harder, more personal decisions, rarely gets offered, which means most people end up paying for what's available, not necessarily what they need. And here's something worth sitting with. No matter what kind of help you bring in, the final decision is always yours. Even with a mortgage advisor, you choose the terms. Even with a financial planner, you decide whether you want to retire a year earlier. Advisors advise, they don't decide. I get where most people come from. When a decision feels too big to get wrong, the temptation is to hand it over to someone with authority. Let them be the ones who sound certain. But even then, they can only advise. The decision lands with you either way. And if this is not your field and you've made mistakes before, that pressure doesn't get lighter the more you think about it. It gets heavier. The analysis paralysis is real. And when you've already spent more time on this than you wanted to, the weight of it doesn't go away just because someone else has an opinion. Because the inputs are always yours, your values, your priorities, your judgment about what matters most to you. Nobody can answer that on your behalf. When I was inside a wealth tech startup, I had the luxury of making my first real investment decision with someone experienced sitting in the room. Not deciding for me, just present enough to help me see if my thinking was sound. And when I performed that first trade, something shifted. I'd always assumed I needed someone else to manage it for me. But in that moment, I realized I had it in me to make that decision. I just needed the right support around it. The problem was that the support isn't really available in the market. And honestly, I only got there because I'd gone extreme length to find the answer. I had a lump sum back then. I went into the research spiral. And eventually, I joined that company's founding team, partly because I couldn't find the answer I needed anywhere else. Most people don't do that, and they shouldn't have to. And after that, I started helping people around me the same way. Informally at first, friends and family, colleagues, people would have been sitting on decisions for months. A lot of them ended up making their first investment. Not because I decided for them, but because having someone thinking it through with them made the decision clear enough to act on. The decisions were always yours, and you have everything in you to make them. What changes is how much structure and support you have around them. The goal of this video is to reframe the question for you. The question is no longer, should I have a financial advisor? It's what kind of help do I actually need, and does what I have now match that? For many capable professionals, the real gap isn't a full wealth management, and it isn't doing everything alone either. It's the middle. You don't need someone to take over your portfolio for years, but thinking through 1 or 2 consequential decisions properly with structure, challenge, and someone who knows the framework, that's often where the real value is. That's the gap I kept seeing in my own experience and in the people I spoke to around me, smart, responsible people who didn't need a full financial plan, who didn't want an ongoing percentage fee, but also didn't want to carry the weight of consequential decisions completely alone. That's why I wrote The Compound, and why I've been building my work around filling that gap. For people who want clarity on the decisions that matter without handing over control. If that resonates, I've linked a short review below. It aims to help you see your own setup more clearly, where the gaps actually are. It's free and only takes a few minutes. Because the goal was never to get the advisor question right, it was to get the right kind of help around the decisions that matter. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next video.